the reminder. I didn't realize that. I forgot. Exodus only has 40 chapters, so so yeah, we're gonna be reading from Exodus 37 to 41. All right, I think we're live now. All right, everyone, we're live. Shalom, everyone. I'm Brother Doug, as always, with the Awakened by Yahuwah Assembly here. We got Brother Yahusha. We got Sister Sadia and her whole family over there in Cali on her line, and we got Sister Milka, and we got Sister Shoshana and Brother Dennis. So now we are going to be doing our regular Sabbath reading. So we left off last time with finishing Exodus 36. So we're going to be doing today Exodus 37 all the way to Leviticus 1. So I think I'll start us off. Let's see here. Let me just exit a lot of these extra windows that are going to slow me down. All right, exit out of there, exit out of there. Okay, so let me just get the word software up here. So okay, all right, so Exodus 37. Okay, here we go. All right, let me fix the modules here we're going to be using. Select Bible text to compare. This, Don Kalos, and LXXE, and Samaritan Pentateuch. Okay, here we go. Why the heck is ISR on this? What are you doing? What are you doing now? No, 4 is too much. No. All right, here we go. The Ark of the Covenant, or the Ark of the Mercy seat with the cherubims made. So this is going to be talking about the construction of the mercy seat and the cherubim that overlay them. All right, so verse 1. And Bezalel made the ark and overlaid it with pure gold, within and without, which would mean inside and outside for those that are not privy to the Middle English language. And he cast for it 4 golden rings, 2 on the one side, 2 on the other side. For some reason, there's no verse 4 here. Weird. Oh, they put it down here. Okay. Wide for the staves, so that men should bear the ark with them. So it's talking about the carrying poles, the staves. He made the propitiatory, or the mercy seat, over the ark of pure gold, and the 2 cherubs of gold, and 1 cherub on the one end of the propitiatory, and another cherub on the other end of the propitiatory, overshadowing the propitiatory with their wings. So now it's going to talk about the table of showbread. And he made the said table of pure gold. Again, seems like the verse numberings are a little off here. All right. And cast for it 4 rings, 2 on one side, 2 on the other side, broad, so that men should lift it with staves in them. Okay. And he made the staves of the ark and of the table and gilded them with gold, or overlaid them. And he made the furniture of the table, both the dishes, censers, and cups and bowls with which he should offer drink offerings of gold. And he made the candlestick, which gives light, of gold. Okay, enough Twitter, enough. And the stem solid, and the branches from both its sides, and the blossoms proceeding from its branches, 3 on this side, 3 on the other side, made equal to each other. Okay. And their lamps, which are on the ends, knops from them, and sockets proceeding from them, that the lamps might be made, that the lamps might be upon them, and the seventh socket on the top of the candlestick, on the summit above, entirely of solid gold. And again, this is why we know that the menorah is only supposed to have 7 branches, 7 right there. Okay. On this candlestick, 7 golden lamps, and its snuffers gold, and its funnels gold. Okay, so now we're getting to the altar of incense. I hate how these verse numberings are so off. He made this, okay, so interesting. The altar of incense is not mentioned in the Septuagint in this chapter. That's the one thing I don't like here. All right. Or actually, no, this, yeah. So where does it start here? Okay, so I'm going to have to read from another version here from verses 25 down, because the whole altar of incense portions have been omitted for some reason in the Vaticanus version. So unfortunately, so I'll read from the Michaelis here. And he overlaid it with pure gold, its top and its side round about, its horns, and he made it for a golden crown round about. And the 2 rings of gold made he for it under its crown. Upon its 2 sides, the place for the staves by which to carry it. And he made the staves of sittim wood and overlaid them with gold. And he made the oil for set apart anointment and pure sweet incense, the work of the perfumer. Most likely this is talking about olive oil, the type of oil they're probably referring to. All right, so now it goes back to being there. Okay, so the anointing oil and sweet incense, he made these set apart anointing oil and composition of the incense, the pure work of the perfumer. And then it goes into the next chapter. Okay. So there's going to be a little differences, just FYI, with the Septuagint. I think it's like a chapter off. So, like, for example, in the next chapter, the Septuagint talks about the brazen altar and all that. So it's going to get a little confusing with the chapter numberings here. So let's see here. Mom, why don't you read chapter 38?
Okay. Okay, the altar of burnt offering. They built the altar of burnt offering of acacia wood, 3 cubits high. It was square, 5 cubits long, and 5 cubits wide. They made a horn at each of the 4 corners, so that the horns and the altar were of one piece. And they overlaid the altar with bronze. They made all its utensils of bronze, its pots, shovels, sprinkling bowls, meat forks, and fire pans. They made a grating for the altar, a bronze network, to be under its ledge, halfway up the altar. They cast bronze rings to hold the poles for the 4 corners of the bronze grating. They made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with bronze. They inserted the poles into the rings so they would be on the sides of the altar for carrying it. They made it hollow basin and its bronze stand from the mirrors of the women who served at the entrance to the tabernacle, the courtyard. Next, they made the courtyard. The south side was 100 cubits long and had curtains of finely twisted linen, with 20 posts and 20 bronze bases, and with silver hooks and bands on the posts. The north side was also 100 cubits long and had 20 posts and 20 bronze basins, with silver hooks and bands on the posts. The west end was 50 cubits wide and had curtains with 10 posts and 10 bases, with silver hooks and bands on the posts. The east end toward the sunrise was also 50 cubits wide, curtains 15 cubits long, were on one side of the entrance with 3 posts and 3 bases, and curtains 15 cubits long were on the other side of the entrance to the courtyard with 3 posts and 3 bases. All the curtains around the courtyard were of finely twisted linen. The bases for the posts were bronze. The hooks and bands on the posts were silver, and their tops were overlaid with silver, so all the posts of the courtyard had silver bands. The curtain for the entrance to the courtyard was of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn and finely twisted linen, the work of an embroider. It was 20 cubits long and, like the curtains of the courtyard, 5 cubits high, with 4 posts and 4 bronze bases. Their hooks and bands were silver, and their tops were overlaid with silver. All the tent pegs of the tabernacle and of the surrounding courtyard were bronze. The materials used. These are the amounts of the materials used for the tabernacle of the testimony, which were recorded at Moshe commanded by the Levites under the direction of Itamar, son of Aaron, the priest. Bezalel, son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, made everything that Yahuwah commanded Moshe. With him was Aholiab, son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, a craftsman and designer, and an embroider in blue, purple, and scarlet yarn and fine linen. The total amount of the gold from the wave offering used for all the work on the sanctuary was 29 talents and 730 shekels, according to the sanctuary shekel. The silver obtained from those of the community who were counted in the census was 100 talents and 1,775 shekels, according to the sanctuary shekel. 1 bekah per person, that is half a shekel, according to the sanctuary shekel, from everyone who had crossed over to those counted 20 years old or more, a total of 603,550 men. The 100 talents of silver were used to cast the bases for the sanctuary and for the curtain. 100 bases from the 100 talents, 1 talent for each base. They used the 1,775 shekels to make the hooks for the posts, to overlay the tops of the posts, and to make their bands. The bronze from the wave offering was 70 talents and 2,400 shekels. They used it to make the bases for the entrance to the tent of meeting, the bronze altar with its bronze grating and all its utensils, the bases for the surrounding courtyard, and those for its entrance, and all the tent pegs for the tabernacle, and those for the surrounding courtyard.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a perspective, I remember it mentioning when it got to talking about King David's diadem, his crown, was 1 talent, and 1 talent is 30 pounds. So that just kind of gives a little perspective as when we're talking about the talents, how much poundage, that was. So just
I noticed that even if you have the same, even if the chaptering is not different, the way the chapter is ordered is different.
Yeah, it's like all messed up. Once you get to the later part of Exodus, the components of these chapters are all mished and moshed. Like that's why I can't throw away the Masoretic, because we're so used to the chapter numberings of the Masoretic. It's good just to have it as a comparison and to know where it's different, what chapters are talking about, what part of the tabernacle and different furnishings, because it gets confusing. It definitely does. The way because the chapter numbers are all screwed up. Once you get to chapter 37, 38,
There's a shade in the backyard and a couch back there.
it goes back to normal though once you get to chapter 40, thankfully. So 40 is the same in both versions.
The backyard in the shade. I just thought the sunshine
Let me
would feel
just
good
see
sometimes.
Let's see here. We got silver being talked about at the end here. We got a little bit of background noise there. I had to mute for a second. So we got the offering of the silver being talked about. Usually shekels is usually the measurement they use. Usually, if you have a very old translation, it'll be shekels. Just because really in the British measurement, what you got to understand too is when they're translating scripture, vocabulary, they're going to try to find the most equal type of word or measurement.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever a shekel originally was in Hebrew or Greek, they're trying to figure that out in the Middle English with the British people.
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure that out. Okay, what's equal to that? And I remember I was watching a video like a year or two ago where shekel is equal to like what it would have been in Hebrew or Greek. It is like exact same measurement. So there's a reason they're using certain words like that, like shekel. And talents is another Middle English word. I'm actually surprised my mom's version has talents in it because that's a very old term, like a Middle English term. I'm surprised the NIV would have that.
Yeah, the NIV uses talents throughout.
It's very interesting because the NIV is very supposed to be contemporary English. It's very interesting.
They probably didn't know what to put in place of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Then you have chapters being talked about. 75 shekels. All right, and then obviously you have the blue being talked about, and the Targums usually will use the actual Hebrew or Greek word here for blue, which is hyacinth, which goes back to the when you look into the root word for hyacinth of the Hebrew and the Greek, especially the Greek, it goes back to the zirconium stone, which is a deep sea blue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they're using that word for blue. So it's basically saying the same thing. It's just using older terminology like hyacinth for the blue, purple for purple, and then you got crimson for red. Crimson is a very old term for red. Yeah. So instruments of the tabernacle witness. Okay, so that's it. So yeah. So for example, here I'll show you guys what me and Joshua were talking about, how it's different with the chapter numberings and all that. Okay, for example, Exodus 39:1 is 36 verse 8 in the Septuagint. It's just all a mishmash once you get to the end of Exodus. That's why I recommend comparing when you're trying to figure out what chapter is which, or at least have a decent Septuagint that's going to let you know in the footnotes, okay, which chapter is which for these components here. So this is going to be the garments of the priests. So let me just see here. See who we all have here. So Brother Yehusha, would you like to read?
Yeah, I wanted to point something out real quick though, because I wasn't actually speaking of the chapter numbering, but the chapter itself, and the ordering of the chapter. Like if you go in the Septuagint, let's say, for example, Exodus 38, this is the same chapter in the Masoretic, but the way that it's ordered is different. Like if you read 24 and 25 in the Septuagint, he made an appendage for the altar of network under the grate, beneath it as far as the middle of it, and he fastened to it 4 bronze rings on the 4 parts of the appendage of the altar, wide for the bars so as to bear the altar with them. He made the Kadash anointing oil and the composition of the incense, the pure work of the perfumer. Now, if you go to the Masoretic, all the gold that was occupied for the work and all the work of the set apart place, even the gold of the offering was 20 and 9 talents and 730 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, and the silver of them that were numbered of the congregation. But I'm pretty sure it starts out the same. Okay, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, it's definitely confusing because the chapters don't even match up, like what's actually in the chapters. Like the chapter of the bronze altar will be a different chapter than in the Septuagint than the Masoretic. So they don't even line up perfectly with the ordering of the instruments of the tabernacle and all that. They'll have the chapter that is talking about, the garments of the priests will not be talking about that in the Masoretic. Like this next chapter is talking about the garments of the priests, and the Masoretic is still talking about the tabernacle. It's at least a couple of verses off at minimum, because it's talking about, in here it says every wise among those that work the robes. It's talking about the robes of Aaron and all that in the next chapter. When you look at the Masoretic, it's still talking about the gold, the blue, and the purple, and the red. That's supposed to be the curtains. It's still talking about the curtains. So it's at the minimum, it's a couple of verses off at the minimum. And then it gets like kind of equal once you get to the next verse. But yeah, it's at the minimum, it's at least a couple of verses off.
39.
Yeah, 39.
All the gold that was employed for the works, according to all the fabrication of the Kadash things, was from the gold of the offerings, 29 talents and 720 shekels, according to the set apart shekels. And the offering of silver from the men that were numbered of the congregation, 100 talents, and 1,775 shekels, one Kadash shekel. Everyone that passed the survey from 20 years old and upwards, the number of 600,000 and 3,550. And the 100 talents of silver went to the casting of the 100 chapiters of the tabernacle and to the chapiter of the veil. What's a chapiter?
Chapter. I think that would be a curtain. Yeah, I think it's still talking about the curtains. Yeah, see, this is the weird thing. The physical Septuagints, they don't fix the chapter numberings. So I think in a physical Septuagint, you would have to go to chapter 36, verse 8, if I'm not mistaken. So that's what it's showing me on the word software here. It has in parentheses for 39 verse 1, 36 verse 8. So I think that's why it's still talking about the veil and the curtains of the tabernacle in your version. I think the chapter numbers are like all weirded out for some reason.
All right.
Yeah, even in the My Sword, it shows it in the parentheses. Yeah, it's 36 verse 8. Would be 39 verse 1.
And 1,775 shekels he formed into hooks for the pillars, and he overlaid their chapiters and adorned them. And the brass of the offering, 70 talents and 1,500 shekels. And they made of it the bases of the door of the tabernacle of witness, and the bases of the court round about, and the bases of the gate of the court, and the pins of the tabernacle, and the pins of the court round about, and the bronze appendage of the altar, and all the vessels of the altar, and all the instruments of the tabernacle of witness. And the children of Yashral did as Yahweh commanded Moshe, so they did. And of the gold that remained of the offering, they made vessels to minister with before Yahweh. And the blue that was left, and the purple and the scarlet, they made garments of ministry for Aharon, so that he should minister with them in the same. And they brought the garments to Moshe and the tabernacle and its furniture, bases and its bars and the posts, and the ark of the covenant and its bearers, and the altar and all its furniture. And they made the anointing oil and the incense of composition and the pure lampstand and its lamps for burning and oil for the light, and the table with showbread, and all its furniture, and the showbread upon it, and the garments of the set apart, which belonged to Harun, and the garments of his sons for the priestly ministry, and the curtains of the court, and the posts, and the veil of the door of the tabernacle, and the gate of the court, and all the vessels of the tabernacle, and all its instruments, and the skins, even ram's skins, and the blue coverings, and the coverings of the other things, and the ends, and all the instruments for the works of the tabernacle of witness. The silver things Yahuwah commanded Mashah, so did the children of Yashrael make all the furniture. And Moshe saw all the works, and they had done them all as Yahuwah commanded Moshe, so had they made them. Moshe baruched them. I'm gonna skip over to the Masoretic, because that's a lot that's missing right there.
Yeah.
Which where in the Masoretic is it chapter 39?
It is chapter 39 in the Masoretic. Where chapter 39 in the Septuagint would be 36, verse 8, all the way down. So, like, for example, the end of 39 compared to it's very confusing. Yeah, it's a lot easier reading the Masoretic, because once you get to verse 31 of chapter 39, the Septuagint jumps to chapter 39, verse 11. It's very confusing. I don't know why they don't just fix it. I think the Complete Apostles Bible actually does fix it and just caters to this Masoretic numberings.
I'm reading the Apostles Bible right now, 24 through verse 24 through 43 is omitted. So you said it's chapter 36 in the Septuagint?
Yeah, according to the My Sword, the Bretons has it as the whole early part of the chapter would be 36, verse 8, all the way down to, let's see where it ends. It goes down to 36, verse 8, all the way to 36, verse 40.
It couldn't be chapter 36. There's no way, because this chapter is talking about the stones on the breastplate.
Okay. That's almost every app I have is that's what it's numbering it as. And then once it gets down to 32, it jumps to the middle or the beginning of chapter 39. So I don't know. It's very confusing.
I'll just say we read from the ABP, because the ABP seems to side with the Masoretic ordering.
Yeah, a lot easier. All right. So where did you stop at? You stopped at verse 23.
I stopped at verse 23, but I don't know where that verse is in the Masoretic, so there's no.
Yeah, let me see here. The undergarment. So I'm looking for the undergarment here. Okay, so I'm looking at the ABP with Strong's. Trying to figure this out here. Okay, so it's talking about the undergarment be interwoven closely. So what I would need to do is multitask here, look at my word software and try to see where the undergarment. Mom, what verse in your
It's 27.
27, right?
About the undergarment.
Yeah, so
28, actually.
so it's about 5 verses off even with the ABP. Yeah, this is where it gets confusing. I think we're just gonna go with the Masoretic, like Brother Yahusha is saying. This gets too confusing. All right, so verse 27. They made the tunics of linen, the work of the weaver for Aaron and his sons. Okay. And the tiara of linen and the miters of beauty of fine linen. So this is talking about basically the crown, the golden piece that would be in the middle of their turbans, basically. The drawer, now it's talking about their inner drawers, their clothing. Drawers of linen, fine linen, twined, girdle of fine linen, twined, hyacinth again, which I talked about was the deep sea blue there. Purple, crimson, work of the embroiderer as Yahuwah commanded Moshe. And they made the plate of the diadem of set apartness of pure gold and wrote upon it as the engraving in the ring of a ring in distinct writing set apartness unto Yahuwah. Okay. All right. For some reason, the Samaritan Pentateuch's even off. That's weird. All right. And they put upon it a ribbon of hyacinth, and it might be upon the turban above, as Yahuwah commanded Moshe. And the completed was all the work of the tabernacle ordinance, and the sons of Yasharel did according to as Yahuwah commanded Moshe, so they did. And they brought the tabernacle to Moshe, the tabernacle and all its vessels, its taches and its boards, bars and its pillars and its bases, and the covering of ram skins, reddened covering of purple skins, and the veil for hanging, and the ark of witness and its staves, and the mercy seat and the table and all its vessels, and the bread of the presence. That would be talking about the showbread. Yeah. The pure candelabrum, it's talking about the menorah, and its lamps, the lamps of order, and all its vessels, and oil for the light. I find it interesting. It's called lamps of order. That's interesting. Golden altar, oil of consecration, sweet incense, and the hanging for the door of the tabernacle. So, by the way, I'm using the Targum Onkelos here because it goes by the Masoretic rendering of the verses, so it's easier to follow. The brazen altar, the brazen grate for its staves, and all its vessels, and the laver and its base, and the hangings of the court, its pillars, and its sockets, the veil for the gate of the court, its cords, and its pins, and all its vessels, and the service of the tabernacle for the tabernacle of ordinance, and the vestments of ministration to minister in set apart place, the set apart vestments of Aharon, the priest, and the vestments of his sons to minister. And that's pretty much towards the end here. According to all that, Yahuwah commanded Moshe, so made the sons of Yasharal all the service, and Moshe surveyed all the work, and behold, they had done it as Yahuwah had commanded, so had they done, and Moshe approved them. So
Hey, we might have to end up actually going back and redoing some of these chapters because the beginning
yeah,
of Kalos, like this is something that we read last week, or not last week, but the week before. If you go to the very beginning of that on Kalos chapter,
yeah,
this is talking about the ephod with the stones and
yeah. It's confusing, the differences in the way they're putting different portions of Exodus in different chapters is the problem, and that's unfortunately because there wasn't originally chapter numberings in the original scrolls. You got men with their own traditions starting to pick and choose where they want to put these portions of Shamut, and so this is the problem. So now we got to try to figure out. Yeah, Brother Yahusha's right. We might have to go back and figure out what actually. That's why it's hard sometimes to follow these chapters. I think in the future, what we'll do is once we get to like the later part of the Exodus, we'll just read the Masoretic numberings until we get to chapter 40 is what we'll have to do, because
read from the Kalos or the eight.
the Unkalos, the Samaritan Pentateuch is even a little off. I've noticed they were a couple verses off in this chapter, where they were a couple verses behind. So it seems like every version has their own numbering system, and that's what's screwing stuff up. Is they're not agreeing on where they're putting some of these commands.
If the AVP and the Onkelos both follow the Masoretic numberings, then we can just use the Onkelos and the AVP as a comparison. I know that AVP that doesn't have the stupid, like the AVP English that you got up there.
Yeah, I got the without the Strongs. Let me see here. Here we go. Yeah, it's ABPEN. So let me get rid of the LXXE. Now it should do it. So chapter 40 is really not going to matter anyway, because chapter 40 is the same in every version. But for those chapters we already previously read, next time we're going to have to do that because it's too different. It's not just the verses being off by a little bit, it's whole chapters having different stuff in them. So, yeah. All right. So, just for time's sake, because we unfortunately got a little confuzzled there in the last chapter, I'm just going to read chapter 40 and then we'll go to a new reader for our last little bit. I'll choose a new reader for Leviticus 1. But here we go. Exodus chapter 40. So this is the chapter, everyone. This is the chapter of the tabernacle being set up on the new moon day. I find this fitting since we just had our new moon literally the other night. So here we go. Exodus 40. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe saying, it's the same thing there. In the day of the first month, in the first of the month, you shall uprear the tabernacle ordinance. Now, this is an important verse here because it's showing that the new moon literally is the same thing as the first of the month. Literally there. The confusion with Kodesh and all that really doesn't matter when you look at the context. It's talking about at the first month of the year, in the first of that month, you rear up the tabernacle. So you can get this understanding from both the Targums, Masoretic, Septuagint, any version, you can get this understanding that the new moon is the first of the month, and there is such thing as a new moon. The Septuagint makes it a little bit clearer, but they are really saying the same thing. On the day one of the month, as ABP says, of the first new moon, you shall set up the tent of the witness. So this is how we know the new moon is not a Sabbath. They're working on a new moon. They're physically building the tabernacle, or at the minimum, rearing it up. That takes a lot of physical labor. Okay. You shall set there the ark of the witness, and outspread the veil before the ark. So in front of the ark. You shall bring in the table, arrange the order thereof, and you shall bring in the lampstand and kindle its lamps. So again, Masha and the Levites will be doing that, not the regular Israelites. And you shall put the golden altar of sweet incense before the ark of witness and set the veil of the door of the tabernacle. Okay. And you shall put the altar of burnt offering before the door of the tabernacle. So this would be like right before the entrance of the tabernacle, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, the tabernacle of ordinance. And you shall place the laver between the tabernacle of ordinance and the altar and put water therein. Okay, and you shall set the court round about and put the hanging at the gate of the court. And you shall take the oil of consecration and anoint the tabernacle and all that is therein, and set it apart in all its vessels, and it shall be set apart. Okay. And you shall anoint the altar of burnt offering, all its vessels, set apart the altar, and it shall be an altar most set apart. And you shall anoint the laver and its base and set it apart. Okay. And you shall bring Aaron and his sons to the door of the tabernacle witness and lave them with water. By the way, anyone that's on YouTube right now, please let me know if it's live streaming, because I keep seeing this notification here, preparing live stream. So please, someone, if they can, go on YouTube and find out if it's actually going through. If not, we're going to have to do a cloud recording for the rest of this. So please let me know, guys, if it's going through. Any of you guys that are that would be on the chat of the live stream, please let me know if it's working correctly. Okay, so verse 13, Aaron and his sons to be sanctified or set apart. You shall clothe Aaron with the set apart vestments, anoint him, and set apart. Yeah, brother Yahusha. It's not going through, right?
It's going through.
Okay. All right. So Zoom is just glitching then. All right. Well, that's a relief. All right. Set apart vestments, anoint him, and set apart him that he may minister before me. So again, this is talking about the vestments. And you shall bring his sons, clothe them with tunics, and set apart them as you did set apart their father, that they may minister before me, and that it may be to them the set apartness of a perpetual priesthood in their generations. Okay. Again, perfect example. I was talking about this other night. See how the Greek word eon is there? Eon doesn't always mean just an age, just FYI. Depends on the context. So anyway, all right. Verse 16, and Masha did according to all which Yahuwah commanded, so did he. Okay, and it was in the first month in the second year on the first of the month, aka new moon, that the tabernacle was reared. And Masha reared the tabernacle and placed its bases and set its boards and fixed its bars and reared its pillars. Okay. And he spread the tent upon the tabernacle and set the covering of the tabernacle over it above as Yahuwah commanded Masha. Okay. And he took and placed the testimony in the ark and set the staves upon the ark and placed the mercy seat upon the ark above. And he brought the ark into the tabernacle in the place where the veil, which was spread to overshadow the ark of witness, as Yahuwah has commanded Masha. And he placed a table in the tabernacle of ordinance upon the side of the tabernacle northward outside the veil. And he set in order upon it the rows of bread before Yahuwah. So we're at Exodus 40, verse 23. It's talking about the table of showbread. They're setting up the table of showbread on the new moon. So it says here, upon the rows of bread before Yahuwah, as Yahuwah commanded Masha. Okay. And he set the candlestick in the tabernacle of ordinance over against the table on the side of the tabernacle southward. And he kindled the lamps before Yahuwah as Yahuwah commanded Masha. And he set the golden altar in the tabernacle of ordinance before the veil and burned thereon sweet incense as Yahuwah commanded Masha. And he set the hanging of the door of the tabernacle. So we have the hangings now being talked about. And the altar of burnt offering he set at the door of the tabernacle ordinance and offered upon it burnt offering in the oblation or mincha as Yahuwah had commanded Masha. And he set the laver between the tabernacle of ordinance and the altar and put water therein for purifying. And Masha and Aaron and his sons purified with it their hands and their feet, and they're going into the tabernacle of ordinance, and in their approachment to the altar, they purify themselves as Yahuwah commanded Masha. And he set up the court round about the tabernacle and the altar and set the hanging of the gate of the court, and Masha completed his work. And the cloud covered the tabernacle of ordinance, and the splendor of Yahuwah filled the tabernacle. And Masha was not able to enter into the tabernacle of ordinance because the cloud abode upon it, and the splendor of Yahuwah filled the tabernacle. And the cloud ascended above the tabernacle. The sons of Yashrael went forward in all their journeys. And if the cloud did not ascend, they did not proceed until the day of it uprising. For the cloud of the splendor of Yahuwah was upon the tabernacle by day. The vision of fire was in it by night. in the eyes of all the house of Yashrael in all their journeys. So that's Exodus 40 there. And that's kind of a little teaser, or we could say a little appetizer for a future study that we are going to be doing about finding Yahusha in the Tanakh there. So we got a couple of instances in this chapter where Yahusha is making his presence known. The pillar of fire, the pillar of the cloud, the splendor of Yahuwah filling the tabernacle. That's Yahusha there. So anyway, I see we got a couple new brothers and sisters in here. Shalom, Sister Josie. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom, Sister Josie.
Let's see here. Let me make sure my droid cam stopped working. That's interesting. Wonder why that is. Oh, I had my camera off. That's why. All right. So does anyone want to volunteer for our last chapter we got here? We got Leviticus 1. Anyone want to volunteer?
I could read if you'd like.
Sure.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Let me get over. Hold on 1 second. Oops. Let me pull up my Bible app. How's everyone doing?
Pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty
Praise
well.
Yah.
We got a little confused once we got to Exodus 37. We're getting different chapter numberings and stuff like that. So we got a little confused there, but we're doing all right.
Okay, so Leviticus 1, chapter 1.
Yep.
Okay. Vayerka. And Yahuwah called to Moshe and spoke to him from the tent of appointment, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when any one of you brings an offering to Yahuwah, you bring your offering of the livestock, of the herd, or of the flock. If his offering is an ascending offering of the herd, let him bring a male, a perfect one. Let him bring it at the door of the tent of appointment for his acceptance before Yahuwah. And he shall lay his hand on the head of the ascending offering, and it shall be accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. And he shall slay the bull before Yahuwah. And the sons of Aharon, the priest, shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood all around on the slaughter place, which is at the door of the tent of appointment. And he shall skin the ascending offering and cut it into its pieces. And the sons of Aharon, the priest, shall put fire on the slaughter place and lay the wood in order on the fire. And the sons of Aharon, the priest, shall arrange the pieces with the head and the fat on the wood which is on the fire on the slaughter place. But its entrails and its legs he washes with water, and the priest shall burn all of it on the slaughter place as an ascending offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And if his offering is from the flock, from the sheep, or from the goats as an ascending offering, let him bring a male, a perfect one. And he shall slay it on the north side of the slaughter place before Yahuwah. And the sons of Aharon, the priest, shall sprinkle its blood on the slaughter place all around. And he shall cut it into pieces with its head and its fat, and the priest shall arrange them on the wood which is on the fire on the slaughter place. But the entrails and the legs he washes with water, and the priest shall bring it all and burn it on the slaughter place. It is an ascending offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And if the ascending offering of his offering to Yahuwah is of birds, then he shall bring his offering of turtle doves or young pigeons. And the priest shall bring it to the slaughter place and shall wring off its neck, its head, and burn it on the slaughter place, and its blood shall be drained out at the side of the slaughter place. And he shall remove its crop with its feathers and throw it beside the slaughter place on the east side into the place for ashes. And he shall split it at its wings, but never sever it. And the priest shall burn it on the slaughter place, on the wood that is on the fire. It is an ascending offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah.
Great job, Sister Josie.
Hallelujah.
Yes.
Great job. Yeah. So now we're finally getting into the shadows, as Paul likes to say. We're finally getting into the all these sacrifices that inevitably pointed to him. So we're kind of just getting a taste of these burnt offerings here in chapter 1. Yahuwah obviously goes into more detail the later you get into Leviticus. But this is kind of just you could say, a introduction into the burnt offerings and ascended offerings, and all that. So what's very interesting, and it's kind of making me wonder whether the Onkelos really was a Targum or not, because there's just too much Greek wording in it not to be traced back to the original Septuagint. I kind of wonder, because it uses propitate for mercy seat. It uses propitate for atonement. I kind of wonder if there is a link between this Onkelos and the original Septuagint from 300 BC. I kind of wonder if it's part of its family somehow, or it's part of a lost family that we don't have today, because it's some of the wording is very similar even to the Bretons here. So I kind of wonder, unless the Targums actually used some Greek in them. I mean, that's a possibility too. But it's very interesting. A lot of Greek wording. If you look at the Onkelos one, it has, for flood, it will say deluge almost every time. I mean, there's a lot of Greek in it. So I just kind of wonder. But yeah, so the turtle doves and the young pigeons, they were kind of like substitutions a lot when they couldn't afford the big animals. You'll see that a lot of the times in the Levitical priesthood, where they're giving sacrifices. And I was reading a chapter, because I'm already in, I've been reading ahead on my own personal readings. I think I'm at like Leviticus 16 now. So just the other day I was reading in chapter 15 about the cleansing of the lepers and all that, and the sacrifice they would have to give for that. It seems like the turtle dove and the pigeons were really like, those were like really for people for certain purposes, where you couldn't afford a lamb, you couldn't afford a ram. So it was like a substitution type of sacrifice usually. And one would be for a sin sacrifice, other would be a burnt offering. So, and as I was finishing Hebrews the other day, putting all this together, it's very clear that when Paul says that he did once and for all, I know a lot of people misunderstand that, for that there's no more Levitical priesthood and all that, and there's no more sacrifices. What Paul meant once and for all, I think he even confirms it later on. He says for sin.
Right.
He does not say Yahusha did it once and for all for the peace offerings and the burnt offerings and every other offering that's in the priesthood. Paul never said that. He clearly clarifies later on in Hebrews, he says, for sacrifice, for sin, the Messiah has done it once and for all. So what we got to understand is there's sacrifices for sin, and then you have burnt offerings, and you have peace offerings, and you have, depending on your translation, there might be guilt offerings, this offering, that offering. There was many different types of offerings in the priesthood. It wasn't just all for sin. So That's another thing that we have to realize too. So when we're reading Hebrews, we have to look at the context of what Paul's talking about. But anyway, that just came to my mind as Sister Josie was reading this, that a lot of these sacrifices are still going to be valid in the millennium when you're talking about the ascended offerings. So this, because I know there might be some out there on YouTube or those that are going to see this on different platforms, they might be questioning themselves like, well, didn't the Messiah do this once and for all? There's no more sacrifices. So the point is that he did once and for all for sin. So that means any sacrifice in the law that had to do with sin or lawlessness, he did away with. That was permanently ended.
Yeah.
But then you have about 70, 80% of the other sacrifices that were not for sin that will be coming back in the millennium. And we clearly see this in Zechariah, in Isaiah, Ezekiel. I think Zechariah 14 even talks about meat pots, if I'm not mistaken. So the flesh of the sacrifices and all that. So Yahuwah's going to bring the Levites again. And we just read, I think, a couple of chapters ago where he says, Aaron and his sons are priests as a perpetual covenant. Okay, that means it cannot be put away. Yahuwah would be breaking his word to end the priesthood permanently when he's giving them a perpetual Levitical priesthood. So he's not going to end something he tells them is permanent. So again, that's part of what we have to understand about Yahuwah's character. He doesn't change. If he says something is perpetual, it's perpetual. So we have to understand the difference between a transition and something being completely done away with. Right now, I believe we are in a transitional heavenly priesthood. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
I think it's right. I could be wrong. That it's only going to be the Zadokites, and that would still be fulfilling because they're descended from Aaron. And so, but that would only be the Zadokite lineage.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. Because at some point, we could even say at the timeline of Hosea 4:6, the actual context there is he's not choosing the regular Levites anymore. He's going to be he had to choose Zadok's lineage because all the rest of the Levites were being wicked. And he's like, you are no longer going to minister to me as priests. And I believe Hosea 4:6 is not talking about Israel as a whole. It's talking about the sons of Aaron that were not doing their job, that forgot his law. He's saying, you're no longer going to minister to me as priest, because when we look up that phrase, minister to me as priest in the Old Testament, it's always talking about the Levites. It's never talking about all 12 tribes. He never chose all 12 tribes to minister as priests. So when we look in context of what Hosea 4:6 in context is talking about, it's talking about what you're mentioning. That he had to change things of the Levitical priesthood in the fact that only a descendant of Zadok now can be a Levite. You can't have regular descendants of Aaron being Levites anymore because they screwed up. So it has to be a direct descendant of Zadok, which, Yahuwah knows who they are. Isaiah 66 says that he's going to choose among Yashrael Levites again. So somehow Yahuwah knows who are the descendants of Zadok today and who are not. Only he knows. We don't know. There's no genealogical records to figure that out right now. So, but he knows. The point of the matter is he knows. But what Brother Yahusha just brought up is 110% correct. There are no more regular descendants of Aaron or priests. It has to be from Zadok. That's in scripture. It has to be from Zadok. And that's why Hosea 4:6 says, no longer will I have you minister to me as priest. Because if you look in Malachi too, a lot of the Levites screwed up. A lot of them screwed up. He said, you're supposed to teach my people the Torah, and you're sacrificing the Baal. What are you doing? You're supposed to be the leaders. You're supposed to be the ones doing the right thing. What are you doing? You despise my name. He says right to the Levites, you despise my name. You don't want to set apart my name. So yeah, I believe there's a lot of proof to what Brother Yahusha mentioned. There's a lot of proof that he changed the Levitical priesthood a little bit. He made, which Yahuwah can do that. He's the lawgiver. He can do that. We can't do that, but he can do that. He can alter things in his Torah. He can change little things in his Torah if he wants to and make it so that it's more specific with the bloodline of the Levitical priesthood. So now it has to be a direct descendant of Zadok. It has to be Zadokites that are priests, which, by the way, I think already that change happened even before the new covenant. If I'm not mistaken, that change would have took place during the time of Messiah on earth, if I'm not mistaken. Like all the Levites at that time would have been Zadokites. From the time of Ezekiel on, you'll see, like, if you read the book of Ezekiel in context, Yahuwah even says, Zadok was faithful to me. So I'm choosing his seed to be the new Levites. So he even says in the book of Ezekiel. So obviously Ezekiel's before the New Testament. So obviously that at that point, he's already choosing Zadokites. So yeah, I would say from that point on forever, it's a Zadokite lineage for the priesthood. And it has to be from Zadok's loins if you are to be a Levite. You can't be just a regular descendant of Aaron. Like, for example, what I mean by this, a regular descendant of Aaron, even if Moses was your ancestor, you can't be a Levite now. That's what I mean. Has to be direct from Zadok. So that's what I mean by that. So anyway, you can look that up for yourselves where he starts talking about Zadok in Ezekiel, but it's very clear that he made a change, he made an alteration in that priesthood even before the new covenant happened. So yeah, there's a lot of proof to that. So anyway, I know my mom I think she wants to say something.
No. I was just thinking of things in my head. That's all.
Yeah. So no, the look you gave me was like you were trying to mention something.
No,
Okay.
there was only one thing that kind of came across to me interesting, and I think I understand it, but the fact that the wings should not be completely severed. I'm thinking that is his way of showing us that even with the animal sacrifices, it needed to be, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit, humane, a little bit, you were just to tear these animals up.
I'm sure there's a spiritual connection to that too.
I think so.
The fact that he always talks about in the shadow of his wings, he keeps us and all that. I'm pretty sure it's more of a spiritual thing that the reason he didn't want them completely breaking in half the bird's wings probably had some spiritual connection, like a fellow brother says, whatever happens in the earthly realm, there's always a spiritual counterpart to it. Mm-hmm. So for whatever reason,
there's definitely a reason.
So go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
I would agree on the spiritual, but I wouldn't take away from the humane part, because we also see that in where he tells you not to partake of animals strangled. When you're killing a lamb, you're slitting its throat. But there are two ways. You can slit its throat without hitting the trachea, and you can slit its throat with hitting the trachea. If you hit the trachea, then he's going to start gasping for air and he's going to choke. Blood is going to go into his trachea and he's going to choke. But if you are able to do it without hitting the trachea, then he won't feel any pain. He just slowly drifts off.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, we think it's weird that you're supposed to kill an animal a certain way in our Greco-Roman culture, but every ancient culture did it that way.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Whether you talk about the Arabs, whether you talk about pretty much any ancient culture understood you're not supposed to be strangling an animal when you're killing it.
Right.
Or making it, fearful with adrenaline and then killing it.
Right.
So you can look that in ancient culture. They understood that you're supposed to slit it like one slit near its throat, and that's it. You're not supposed to be strangling it and all of that. It's really supposed to be one cut to the neck and it's dead. And then you pour the blood out on the ground. It's really not that complicated. But so anyway, I think Muslims to this day, they'll actually make sure they get meat that's not strangled.
Oh, yeah.
From the Muslims I've talked to, they're very, very religious on that aspect. They're very, they will not, they want to make sure that they're not getting meat that's been strangled or treated the wrong way and all that. So, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's why I have no problem getting halal meat. I actually prefer getting meat that's halal because I know they treat it right. If I can afford it, I like getting halal meat versus, regular meat. So, yeah. But anyway, so let's see here. I think that's about it. I don't think there's anything else I really wanted to mention today. So we finished up our portion for today. Yahuwah willing, will be, going into Leviticus, I guess, 2:6 next week, chapter 2 to chapter 6. So, like I always say, the brothers and sisters out there, thank you for joining us. And those on YouTube, thank you for listening in and viewing. If there's anyone out there that has questions, concerns, if you have any questions, even about a little commentary we had at the end about the priesthood and all that, feel free to reach out. I'll try to help you guys understand the distinction between, what Yahusha did away with versus what sacrifices are still going to be in there in the millennium and all that. So other than that, I just want to say have a great rest of your Sabbath, brothers and sisters out there. In Yahuwah Almighty and Yahushua Messiah. Shalom.